Okay, I'll call the Committee of the Whole to order now. We have 5 items. The first item is a quick update on the mission and activities of the Northwest Youth Services.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Rhiannon Bardsley. I've met most of you. I'm the Executive Director of Northwest Youth Services here in Whatcom, and we also have programs in Skagit County as well. So I invited myself to your meeting, so thank you for having me. That's how that works. I wanted to really to say thank you for your continued commitment to the young people in the city of Bellingham as well as their families. The recent approval of CDAB and the mayor's recommendations for human and health services is the funding recommendations that you guys approved is being invested, thousands of dollars is being invested into young people and their families. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that, and I appreciate your hard work and dedication. I also wanted to let you know that a portion of those funds are going to be are going to benefit 4 of Northwest Youth Services 10 programs. So I want to go through those, the 4 that that the city funds have been invested in. The first one is the Northwest Youth Services Vocational Readiness Program, and it's kind of a new thing. We've been doing it for a few years now, and we just had some federal funders come through and named the We Creations portion of our vocational program as a best practice nationwide. So that is really fantastic news, and a big the city invested in that, and if we didn't have the money from the city to do that, that program would not be here. So thank you very much for that. In addition, we also have a garden that goes along with that program, and we have case management, and we also have paid internships. So there's a variety of different ways that young people can come in depending on their unique skill sets and their past experience with employment and school. The city funds also go to the Teen Court program, which is in its 16th year, and this is a second-time juvenile offenders case or a program. So we have, it's actually held in the county courthouse, and there's teens who are on the jury and who are the judge and the advocates and the bailiff, and they hear real-time second diversion programs and cases. So young people get to go up and get to admit that they made mistakes, and they get to hear from a jury of their peers that that is unacceptable, and which what we know for young people is that their peers are way more influential than we ever could be. As much as we want to be, we're not. So that is a fantastic program and has wonderful success rates. We're usually between 84 and 95% success rates in those completing those contracts. So that's fabulous. And also the city funds 50% of that program, so the county also funds it. So between the city and the county, that program is able to continue on. We also have the PAD program under the city grants, and that is a emergency housing program for 13 to 17-year-olds, and it's the only one in the county. So if we have a young person that's a minor that has nowhere to sleep at night, they can come to the PAD. And if the PAD wasn't here, they would be sleeping outside, or they'd be sleeping in some very unsafe situations with not nice adults. So it's really wonderful that we have a place for young people. And we have never had to turn anybody away from that. We've always had the capacity to take in a minor, which is wonderful. So thank you. And then the Transitional Living Program is the last of the 4 programs that the city funds are going to. Bless you. And this is an amazing program as well. It's been around for many years, and the city's been invested in it. And it is it's a transition program for 18 to 21-year-olds who are experiencing homelessness. And we actually, I just went over a 1-page pamphlet this morning. HUD is profiling and highlighting Northwest Youth Services housing programs as a best practice across the nation as well. So that's another fabulous thing. I can't wait to see that. I'll send it out to you. And as the sole housing provider for youth, we are just extremely grateful that young people are actually seen in this community and not ignored. We go to many other communities, and young people are just not a priority, or they're looked at as trouble or bad or not worth it and not a good investment and broken, and that is not what we see here in this community. So thank you for that. Between those 4 programs, we will see about 250 young people affected because of the money that the city has invested in Northwest Youth Services and these 4 programs. I'm not really a data person, but I'm going to go into 4 data points. So the 2015 point in time count just came out, and we identified 98 young people who are homeless on one day. We also, as an agency, have seen our wait list hover between 75 and 90 young people. So, like I said, for minors, we don't have a wait list, but for housing for the 18 to 24-year-olds, we have 75 to 90. 19 to 24% of the young people that we're seeing are identifying as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, which is very disproportionate to the public. So the fact that we have young transgender people on the street, it's extremely unsafe for them. They're way more vulnerable. They oftentimes don't like going to other shelters. They're sometimes not treated respectfully or safely, and so as an alternative, they will sleep outside. But it's an amazing number. That 19 to 24% is huge. And then in 2014, Northwest Youth Services saw 819 young people come through our doors. We haven't seen that in a long time. So right now, we are working on developing a plan. So we have a plan to end homelessness in Whatcom County, but we don't talk about, we have a little small portion in there about youth, but what we're trying to do is actually expand upon that and build a plan that will actually prevent young people from coming out into the street, and then if they do, that they're able to get into housing and case management and wraparound services within 30 days. So that is our goal. And we're doing that, we're building this plan by convening focus groups of young people, which are hilarious. And we asked, we just had one with some minors, and when we asked them what kind of housing they wanted, they talked about like glass houses with no restriction and no mirrors, and they're just beautiful and wonderful, right? But then we asked them about what would need to be in place in our community in order for them not to have ended up homeless, and they said time for their parents to have connected with them. So there was no space, they didn't feel bonded, or they don't feel that their parents are bonded to them, and in essence now they are out on the street. So I thought that was very interesting. I've got to figure out how to build a program around that one, because that is the goal. We're also doing research. We've got King County has a great plan that we're using kind of as a guide, and we're also doing learning visits. So we're going out to other communities and seeing what kind of programs and services are offered. So we've gone to Portland, we've gone to LA, we've gone to a few places to kind of get a picture of what's going on out there. I do want to, I think we're running out of time, so I do want to pass out this, which is really cool. This is one other thing that Northwest Youth Services has worked on with a variety of other youth nonprofits in the state. And so Washington State just passed a Homeless Youth Prevention and Protection Act, which is really fantastic. So this is actually going to create an office where there'll be someone responsible for helping to coordinate a lot of different efforts. So not only funding efforts, but policy efforts. And so part of it is, so one of the things we do in Washington State is we exit young people out of foster care into homelessness, and we also exit young people out of the jail and detention into homelessness. And so we're going to be doing some work on trying to find more alternative, constructive, effective ways to transitioning young people. We also, just as a side note, about 25% of youth who age out of the foster care system end up homeless and on the street within a year. So it's a quarter of our young people. So in addition, we also will be seeing some of the state-funded programs now moving over to, like the funded programs that are overseen by like CPS and Department of Licensing are now going to be going over to this new office, so that across the state things can be done a little more consistently and can be in line with the other homeless programs that that exist at the state. So that will be nice. And so you'll see this is just a one-page handout that you can take a look at. The other thing that's really fantastic is that we're going to focus on stable housing, family reconciliation, the vocational pieces, permanent connections, and social and emotional well-being. And so that's something that the runaway and homeless youth providers, federal providers, work on, but not necessarily all the other funded funders. So this will be really nice to align all of the funders' goals so that we're not trying to please 5 people with one program. So we can just really stay focused on what best practices are. So that's very cool. The last piece, I just want to tell you a really quick story about a young man who is actually in the foster care system, and we found out about him after he had been out on the street for a little more than a year. He has a young daughter who is 2 years old. He had been in and out, the father had been in and out of jail, and the daughter had been in and out of CPS, and so, and out of foster care. And so we ended up finding out about this young person, and he came into our transitional living program, and he had at one point had a job for about a week, and that was all he could maintain, just because of his criminal history and because of coming in and out of jail, not being able to really be stable in housing or in employment. And so once he came into our transitional living program and started working with our case managers and getting his daughter into daycare, it took him about 7 months, but he finally now has a job. He's got full-time employment. His daughter is stable and in childcare. He's a single parent. And he has not been in jail one time since entering into the Northwest Youth Services Transitional Living Program, and he's now kept his job for at least a month is what we have right now. So we'll see. But as we all know, it's learning, right? So part of learning and growing and thriving is making mistakes, and so he can do that in our program without the dire consequences of homelessness. So thank you very much for your investment.
Thank you, Rihanna. Any questions before she skates away real quick? Roxanne?
I currently serve as the youth director for my Nooksack Indian tribe. And so in that role, lately I've just been thinking about all of the challenges, old and new, that our youth are up against. And so that's why I so highly support the interventions that you provide with your program. I myself started out life as a foster kid, and who would have thought that young Native foster kid would become a youth director and then get to sit up here. So I really value what you do.
Awesome. Thank you. Haishka.
Yeah, I really appreciate you highlighting that last story, because I think that's a really important problem that we have in this community. Young adults, particularly young adults that are trying to transition, that got in trouble as juveniles, they've made bad decisions, and now they try to get their life straight, but now they've got a record. Now, so it impacts housing, it impacts jobs, it impacts all these different things. And it's, having worked in some of those populations, have observed those populations, it becomes almost impossible. There's so much stuff that they have to do to get it together that they end up so many times spiraling back into the jail system. So we have to build more jail cells as opposed to putting money into these kind of programs that really work to keep people out. Once we have case management that can help, particularly this population, because the brain is still not functioning like adults. They are, officially adults at 18, but, up through, 23, 24, their brains are, especially if there's been drug and other stuff involved, it's still spinning, still trying to make those connections. And these kind of programs are so critical to help these young people make that transition. So, one, thank you for all the work you're doing, but we need a lot to do that kind of lot of work to make sure we can fund more of those kind of programs that help those transitions.
Dan?
I would make a motion for that.
Go ahead, everybody else does.
I just do want to say the science, they're now saying that for females, the brain isn't fully developed until 26, and males until 28, 29. So it's just evolution is changing the way it starts going back down real quick, too, I hear.
Dan, go ahead.
Sure. I just wanted to acknowledge I just wanted to say that I support Northwest Youth Services. I've worked with them for about 10 years, sending volunteers their way, and actually helped break ground on that garden about 4 or 5 years ago. I did want to point out a couple of things. One, the program, the job vocational readiness program across the street and down State Street there is an excellent program. Jason Dahlman is the person who runs that program. And also that the PAD, the Positive Adolescent Development facility, was not in, we didn't have that in Bellingham for years. And that was, I think, a real travesty. I'm just really so supportive of that program to house those kids that are vulnerable. I did have one question, though. Yes. On the fiscal impact here, it says the City of Bellingham will grant $733,000 to Northwest Youth Services. In 2015, $595,000 of which is a loan dedicated to new housing production. I'm just wondering what the balance would be used for. Is that for operational?
I believe the 500 number is for the renovate or the capital project, right? The building, and then the balance is the programs, the Teen Court program, the PAD, TLP, and vocational. Is that correct? Yes. So altogether, the 4 programs plus then the capital.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, we
Thank
will now
you.
move on to our next item, discussion of new proposed jail facility. We have that scheduled for 30 minutes. We're going to stick to the 30 minutes because we have a financial report and 5 executive session items for the rest of the afternoon. So, who's going to lead us off here? Oh, we have to wait a minute. I'm sorry. No, we don't have to wait a minute. We're under committee of the whole. We can keep going.
Can I introduce Jack?
Yes, you may.
Just so you know. Anyway, there were questions that the council had, and I asked Jack if he would answer those questions for us, and he has. And so this is our opportunity to ask him about his answers, right?
Sure is.
Okay.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity to be here. If I can just spend a minute,
Sure. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, on
Go
this,
ahead.
and
Go
a
ahead.
little bit
Yep.
of an opening statement, and then obviously open it up for questions and answers. I'd really looking forward to that. As you know, the county has been engaged in building a replacement correctional facility for a number of years. This came up on our radar starting in 1997. We've gone through a series of events in the last 18 years to get to where we're at today. In the near term, the Jail Planning Task Force in 2011 determined that we needed a new facility. Whatcom County Council, along with the administration, undertook a property search, and we bought just under a 40-acre site on the Labounty Road in Ferndale. Subsequent to that, we went through hired DLR architects as our advisors, went through a need assessment. They came up with a proposal for between a 545 and 660 bed facility. Engaged with the Whatcom County Council, we determined that 521 beds was a good number for us to work on. That's 504 regular beds with 17 beds in the correctional or in the medical facility. So for a total of 521. As many of you know, the Institute of Corrections says that a jail works at its most efficient number at 80% capacity. Therefore, we are really building a replacement facility that is going to house about 417 prisoners most efficiently. In 2014, our average daily population was 403. So I feel that we've worked to make sure that this jail is as right-sized as possible for our needs of today, and then also looking out the next 20, 30 years as it's going to take us to pay the bonds off, so that we aren't going to get into a position where we'd have too small of a jail prior to the bonds being paid off. So starting last September, worked with Mayor Linville along with the other mayors to put a jail facility use agreement together. That agreement was given to all of the 8 legislative bodies in the county April 10th of this year. That's the 7 cities and the Whatcom County Council. To date, 5 of the 7 cities have passed the jail facilities use agreement. The Whatcom County Council has dealt with the jail facilities agreement a number of times since the first part of April. It's on the agenda for action on the May 26th evening agenda. Doesn't mean that they're going to take action, but in collaboration with the council chair, it was decided to put it onto the agenda with a recommended action for a vote on the jail facility use agreement and the resolution that is authorizing my signature on that particular document. Along with that, when this agreement was presented to the Whatcom County Council in early April, it was determined that Whatcom County and the cities needed to do more as it related to jail diversion and recidivism issues. And working with Council Chair Weimer, the administration has put together what now is an ordinance establishing a Whatcom County Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force, which is intended to provide recommendations, oversight, and specific timeframes on the development of a new or enhancement of existing programs designed along a continuum that effectively reduces incarceration of individuals struggling with mental illness and chemical dependency and minimizes jail utilization by pretrial defendants who can safely be released. Now, that's a big mouthful. I do understand that. But what this ordinance is saying is that Whatcom County does, along with building a replacement correctional facility, has a need and a desire to work with those in our community that are being housed in our jail who could and should be dealt with in an alternative manner. So our council is going to continue with the discussion of this ordinance establishing this task force in a committee of the whole also on May 26th. And by all indications is that this will be passed over the next few weeks, with the possibility that it may be introduced on the evening of the 26th for action in a couple of weeks after that. With that said, Bellingham administration and through the Bellingham Council asked a series of questions. We took it upon ourselves to put together a nice notebook for you that answered the questions to the best of our ability, plus provided a lot of background information, questions such as what the city council or our county council have asked, plus some of the backup documentation. I'm here today to engage you on this. When I submitted the jail facilities use agreement to you on April 10th, I asked asked kind of a series of leading questions. One, I believe it's in the best interest of Whatcom County and the cities to work collaboratively on building a new jail that will serve the county's legally responsible inmates along with serving the city's legally responsible inmates. I think that that's the right thing for us to do. With that said, that's not my decision. That's really a decision of the legislative bodies throughout Whatcom County. As I've noted, we have 5 of the legislative bodies that have moved forward on it, and I'm appreciative of that. I'd like your support of it. But if indeed it's not something that you feel is in the best interest of the city of Bellingham, what I really would ask is when you take the vote, if it's not in the affirmative, is to give me clear indication of what's wrong with the agreement so that I can figure out whether or not we can put this thing back together, go out to all of the legislative bodies once again to see whether we can get this placed on the ballot for the voters' ultimate decision of whether or not we can make this happen. So with that, I'm here today to answer any questions that you may have, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you for taking the time to come here today and also answering the questions. Questions for Mr. Laus? Terry?
One of the questions that wasn't in the book, at least I never found it, it asked about when funds are collected and before spending starts, the interest money that's derived from the collected funds, will that be used for the construction and running of the jail or diverted to other county uses? Because we've got, you know, and
The way the agreement is written, and I think that the question was asked as one of the 16, or very
yeah, but I didn't
closely.
see it. Maybe I missed it.
Closely
That's why
asked
I'm
with
asking.
that.
I
yes,
couldn't
is
find
that
it.
Under state law, the sales tax will be distributed to the counties and the cities as per state law, which says that the county will receive 60% of it, the cities will receive 40%. The cities receive their money, and then under the agreement, in the first 3 years, the cities will give us 75% of that pool so that the county can build up a reserve fund to pay for the construction interest that we're going to have between now and 2019, and to pay for the deficit that the county is going to have between 2019 and about 2026. The cities are going to retain the portion that they aren't going to be giving the county. So there really is no huge fund balance that's going to be built up other than in that initial 3 years. This money goes to you. You're going to be making a payment to the county for the capital needed to pay for the retirement of the bonds.
But to answer the question, maybe there's not a huge fund and maybe it's only for 3 years, but does the interest accumulated on that fund go back into use for payment of, because in past times there's been some things, you know, that county has used other funds, some of the homeless funds and stuff, to use the interest to fund other programs. And so we wanted to make sure. And
the money that is received from the cities to the county will be used by the county, and the money received and retained by the cities will be used by the cities. It's I don't know how else to say that other than we're going to collect about $12 million in the first 3 years, of which $6 million of it is going to get paid to pay the construction interest on construction. The remaining $6 million is going to stay in a county fund that will be drawn down in the first couple years by $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 a year up until about 2026, when the sales tax increase at 2.5% catches up with the cost, and then at that point we'll start rebuilding it up. So the money that we receive from interest on that will stay in our account.
okay. I didn't see the answer in it before, so.
Other question?
Good question.
Dan?
In the first question on page 1 here, it states that both the task force and the jail development are running in parallel with each other, and they will not be tied together. What I'm trying to get at here is to try to have some understanding around what the county's perspective is on these diversion programs that have been talked about as relates to behavioral health and crisis intervention, triage, and recovery. I see all those items as being kind of part of the equation, and I brought this up more than one time before. We're number 3 and number 4 in Washington State when it comes to opiate hospitalization treatment and heroin hospitalization treatment. So what I see as a drug crisis in Whatcom County. And so what I'm trying to understand is, why are these things being separated out from this jail proposal when in fact they are driving elements oftentimes as to why people end up there.
When I proposed the original agreement, I think it was about on September 20th of 2014, I put together a proposal that first built the jail. Second, we used the excess money for programs such as diversion, mental health, and so on and so forth. Third, we kept the facility up with maintenance. It was the desire of the mayors of the community, because you guys and we also have costs to operate the jail, that the cities needed to retain a portion of that sales tax for their use to reduce the per diem rates down. As soon as that happened, we weren't all working together to not only provide a jail and to provide the treatment area, the treatments necessary, as it became evident, because of there's a finite amount of dollars, that the sales tax receipts that we were going to receive were going to be used solely for the construction and the operation of the jail facility. So through that, we're going to collect over the next 32 to 33 years about $350 million worth of sales tax revenue if it increases at about a 2.5% rate. Of that 350, it's going to take about $200 million to pay the bonds off. $100 million project. It's kind of like a house. It costs you about double. With that, the cities are going to retain about $75 million of that to offset their operational costs, and the county is going to retain about $70 million to offset its operational costs. So if you take the costs of running the facility plus the capital costs, we're going to spend about $1 billion running the jail in the next 32 to 33 years. One of the challenges that many communities have when they build a facility is they can come up with the money to construct it, but you need to operate it, and you need to operate it efficiently once you've built it. And one of the things that I've been cognizant of is that we need to be able to operate this efficiently also once we build it. We put an 8,000 square foot medical wing in it, and we have we have the nurses and the doctors and the psychiatrists and the healthcare professionals and the social workers that are going to be inside that facility. We need to pay for it and run it efficiently. So the jail facility use agreement, the financial arrangement that we have, does not account for the need that we have outside of that. That's why we have the behavioral health sales tax money. We have a commitment for that. The county, through the jail facilities use agreement, has agreed that if we sell the Division Street property, that we'll use that and keep that capital within that. But as it relates to being able to go out and sell bonds and so on and so forth, the money is just not there to make that happen. Therefore, they're separated from each other. But along with that, through the ordinance and through the document, they are intertwined. But it's not tied together as within the financial arrangement of the jail facility use agreement.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Michael?
I guess I was surprised at the very beginning when one agreement came forward that didn't separate capital and operations. They're really quite different, and the funding is also quite different for those. Mm-hmm. For example, operational costs might be supported by a long-term, enduring, and never expiring property tax, whereas the sales tax could expire and could be used only for capital funding. Mm-hmm. Sort of a hybrid model. If the county used some of its bank capacity, wouldn't quite be enough, but there might need to be other funding. But you kind of put together a capital package and then put together an operational package, and those might be separable. I think they maybe ought to be separable, because one, you would want to have being enduring and permanent and ongoing and scale with increasing needs or increasing costs over time. The other would be more finite and would have a clock on it and would expire. Is there, how much room is there left for dividing out those interests and clarifying and funding those components with a separate or different models?
In my analysis of it, it would take 2 affirmative votes from the public to make that happen if we were to go in that direction. One, you would need to have the property tax measure approved by a 60% vote of the people. And then we would also need to have 1% of a sales tax measure. Possibly would need to use some bank capacity after that. So in discussions with the mayors and with the other elected leadership at Whatcom County government, it was everybody, that group at least, decided that the sales tax measure going to the full 2/10 that's allowed under law that we still have available to us, that takes in, that would collect enough money for the capital and to give us some relief on the operations, was the appropriate way to go. Now, if Bellingham Council said, no, we aren't willing to go down that route at that particular time, I don't know what my answer would be, or what the Whatcom County Council's answer would be, or what the other six cities would be on that, but that decision was, and that path forward was made in collaboration with the mayors, in consultation with the other electeds, auditor, assessor, treasurer, prosecuting attorney, and sheriff over on the other side of it, and that's the method that I've proposed to move forward for your consideration.
Well, the 2/10 and just a pure sales tax does have the advantage of simplicity, and I believe I understand now that half of that 2/10
Yes.
is set to expire, so you've sort of been part of what I was hoping for, having part of it expire.
At the from the sale of the bonds, which is identified before the end of 2018, and 30 years thereafter or sooner, when the bonds are paid off, 1/10 of 1/10% will expire. It's part of the jail facility use agreement, and it's part of the ballot title that the Whatcom County Council will be considering. So we will make a legal commitment to the community that the end of that time is 1/2 of that tax will expire.
I guess I'm still concerned, kind of from an equity standpoint, that a sales tax is not. It's not as good a tax as other taxes that may be fairer from an equity standpoint. So I guess that's why I would, even if it's more complicated, I think I would have preferred to be able to rely upon property taxes as well as sales taxes to spread the burden in a way, I think, which is better for the community. I also think we have a rare moment in time where I think everyone understands the need for a new jail, and if we're ever going to get the public to agree to a slightly complex but better package, I think this is the sort of project that would get that kind of voter approval.
Jack?
I want to follow up on what Michael's saying, and what, Jack, you had mentioned the scenario of having a property tax and then scale down the sales tax down to 1%. Have you done any calculations in a ballpark way of figuring out what a millage rate might be for a property tax under that type of scenario?
You know, I have, but it's been so many months ago, I would be hesitant to tell you right now what that would be. I think we got about $30 billion in valuation. We need about $6.5 million a month. So you do the math. I'm not going to go there right now on record because I'll be wrong.
Okay.
But thanks for asking. You put me to the test.
It's interesting because, I mean, follow up on what Michael's saying is that we do have a fairly golden moment right now where I think the population would support it. For me, I'm not scared of a 60% vote. I think everybody's behind wanting a new jail. It's really just the proper way of financing it and the proper alternatives for diversion that I think can be included into the entire program. And I think everybody will be on the same page with that. It's just really a question of how best to go and figure that out. And to me, I think that the millage rate would be an important part because it kind of give people a sense of whether or not they're going to get scared about the financial implications of that versus being literally nickeled and dimed on sales tax forever and ever.
And as I've said, there's two trains of thought on that particular issue, and in collaboration with the majority of the mayors and the electeds, that they discussed all of those options and felt that the 0.2% sales tax under the under the rules that we have and the taxation bases that we have in the state, that was the best way to go.
Terry?
Yeah, I guess this question actually goes to the mayor, because a big part of the questions that we sent over came from Chief Cook and other members of your staff. In particular, parts of it was relating to the percentage of use, paying for actual use as opposed to larger percentage than the population and stuff. Have you had a chance to discuss with your staff the responses we got back? Because I was expecting that as part of today.
Yeah, and
so,
I've been on
because before I'm,
I've been on vacation,
Yeah.
Terry, so this is the first time I've seen these answers. I've been gone for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
so.
because that part is really important to us, because we do rely on the staff, and there were some very important questions that were asked that I can't fully evaluate without their input, because they're the ones, Brian and Deputy Chief Dull and others, who were looking at those.
Well,
so I would really want to see what their response is to some of, to the answers. Were the questions answered? Where are, what's the opinion now?
Right, and
so we can, because that's what we depend on.
This is your opportunity to ask
I know.
Jack his opinion, and
Right.
you will, if when you want that information from our staff. We talked about this before the questions went. I mean, these questions, I can let Peter answer that, but they were formulated based on the concerns that people had raised, whether it was the council or staff. So, yes, you can get that, but I haven't had a chance. I'm just back today, so
No,
I haven't had
I
a
know, I
chance.
was just, but your other staff was, so I thought maybe we would have that so we would be able to reference in terms of asking those questions.
I would imagine we doing that after the county takes, if they take a vote on the 26th, and you bring it back to us, and we could have that discussion with the staff before we vote on anything.
I wished I had the questions that were asked in terms of the usage and percentage being paid and the amount of actual use.
And we can, and those details will be coming forward to you. When Jack asked to come here to answer questions, I thought it was a good opportunity for you guys to talk directly to him about his perception and his thoughts and his preferences for this package. So,
Any other questions? Michael?
Thanks, Gene. I want to ask about, well, what I have is a resolution with regard to the Criminal Justice Diversion Task Force. There's now an ordinance that follows that or something. And so I want to ask about that task force and or that ordinance. It seemed to focus, a large part of the focus was on the triage center, what that could be and what purposes, but also in resolution form it was broader. It talked about addressing both pre-arrest and post-incarceration interventions, things to keep people out of jail and things to keep them from returning to jail. How might those efforts be funded? Does the county feel that with the existing behavioral health tax credit that there is adequate funding for those? If we need an equally robust or maybe even a more robust programs to keep people out of jail or from returning to jail, how might that be funded? And is there any way, and I'm going back to property taxes versus sales taxes, if this is a county-wide need, is that an increment over the, if you put together the jail and, how do we fund the and part?
Well, we have about $3.8, $3.9 million a year that's coming in on the behavioral health sales tax, 0.1 of 1%. We're spending about $4.1 million right now because over the last 3 years, with the development of the mental health court and trying to kickstart some of the programs that we have, we have upped our game in that area. But we are going to pull $75,000 to $100,000 of that a year to be able to fund a professional to help us facilitate all of these items. At least $75,000 is in for this year. the council through the next budget process and through the what is now an ordinance replacing the resolution, that we'll be considering putting a full-time staff member on related to that. But we feel that through appropriate discussions with the Behavioral Health Task Force, the newly created task force that we're going to have, and with our professionals, that we should be able to get $300,000 to $400,000 a year out of that we would be able to invest into some long-term notes to be able to get the capital projects that we're going to be needed to possibly create a new and or expanded crisis triage center and an emergent care center, which we think are going to be, I'm actually thinking that may go together, but that's going to be task force issues. But yes, that there's a finite amount of money related to that also, and it's going to be a matter of analyzing all of the programs that we have and being able to assess the effectiveness of those programs and to make decisions of where it's best to spend the monies that we have. Along with that, we're going to be talking and discussing with the cities what help the city of Bellingham is going to be able to put in, what help that Ferndale and Linden are going to be able to offer as it relates to this. Because it's not only a county problem it's the city's problem also. So the task force has a number of members attached to it from both the county and the city, and representatives from the small cities, one representative of the city attorney or the municipal court or police, and so on and so forth, Bellingham City Council member. We need to work collaboratively together to figure out what's best. I can't imagine that putting together a crisis triage center and a emergent care facility wouldn't go anywhere other than probably relatively close to Peace Health and in the city of Bellingham. So we would expect, I would expect that moving down the road is that we're going to partner on these discussions to make the right decisions for our community, because they're going to benefit our largest city probably as much as it's going to help everybody in related to what the jail costs are moving down the road, and the good that we can do within our community, helping those citizens out that need their help. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity, and I think that as I've stated, and it's been around is that going through and getting this jail facility use agreement put together, the administration, somewhat lost track of one of the tasks that we were assigned was to create ways to keep people out of our jail. Our council identified that as something that we needed to take a really close look at, and I'm pleased that we're working together with our council to put this task force together. We can couple that with the additional monies that the Affordable Care Act appear to be bringing into our community through the North Sound Mental Health Association, NISMA. And I think if we can tie all of these pieces together, we can do some really good work here in the next 3-4 years as it relates to county incarceration prevention and reduction.
Yeah, I think everyone agrees that we need a strong jail for the truly criminal, and I guess a lot of the concern has been about people who end up becoming criminal because of the mental health or substance abuse kinds of issues. And I think one of the largest things the city is doing right now is basically our housing first strategy, that we're working hard on providing stable housing for people, which is a very good way of enabling them to deal with those behavioral or substance abuse issues so they don't end up being picked up for criminal action.
Northwest Youth Services doing an excellent job in our community. I mean, one of the successes that I don't take credit for, but since 2000, the amount of youth that we have in the detention facility has gone down. If we over the next few years can continue to do that work and it translates into the adult population, it's not that we don't need a new jail, we do. Hopefully what it'll do is eliminate our need for expanding it for years and years and years to come. That would be a great thing.
Amen.
Okay, we're going to have one last question from Pinky, and then we'll move on. And then you can say a final word, Mayor. Go ahead, Nikki.
As a segue to that, thank you, Executive Laus. Because we've been having some robust discussions about diversion programs and looking at that, I'm wondering if we're revisiting the thought of reducing the size of the actual jail, if that is part of our discussion at all.
Well, I believe that based on the needs assessments that we've had all the way back from starting back in about 1997 till now is that we're doing pretty well as it relates to the size of the jail. You know, obviously you could go up or down a few beds related to it, but I would rather at this particular time to make sure that the jail is sized for the next 30 years, which is the life of the bonds, that we build it the right size and that we have space in it if needed for the cities primarily to have space to house their misdemeanors. Because under the state law, the county needs to and is required to house the felons. The worst of the worst need to be in the jail. If we build it, let's say, 100 beds smaller, and the county has it filled up with felons, the cities then are not going to have a place for the people that either refuse diversion through the RCWs and through state law are not entitled to diversion through the sentencing guidelines we have, and therefore then the city's community policing that they need to take care of is there won't be any place to house those prisoners. So we need to do it, we need to build it the right size. So I think that 521 beds, 80% gives us about 416 to 417 capacity. You know, if we run that at 70% capacity instead of 80% capacity, there's not a lot of harm in that. I mean, the capital costs of having that bigger facility aren't going to hurt us. That's going to provide those 17 beds in the medical facility for mental health issues, substance abuse issues, whether they come in with communicable diseases, the special needs wing that we have. If we aren't filling that jail up, there's nothing wrong with that. But if we build it too small and we don't have a place for those prisoners, it's really the cities that are going to be most affected. The city of Ferndale is concerned that that's exactly what's going to happen is that the facility would get downsized. They aren't voting for their proposal because they don't want to commit their sales tax to a facility that may be too small for them over the next 30 years to use. So, Pinky, I believe that Ms. Vargas, I'm sorry. I believe
We can be informal.
We've done a good job of sizing the facility. It's a replacement facility. All of our consultants say that we should build it bigger. If we were building a jail equivalent in size to what Skagit County is doing based on their population, we'd be building a jail at 703 beds. We're building it at 521, and which is about the lowest in terms of beds per thousand in population that we have in the state. So at some point we need to get beyond that particular discussion and say, hey, we need a new jail, a replacement jail, and that's what I'm asking for you. So thanks for allowing me to be here to answer questions today.
Okay, Mayor.
And I want to thank you for coming, Jack. Thank you. Just to follow up just briefly on Michael's question, the cities, I believe, their responsibility and what we have been doing is trying to prevent people from entering the system. So they're not necessarily being diverted or treated in the jail, but they're the Housing First program that Michael talked about. And, you know, the proposal this year is for $17.3 million from the city to do that. So I know the city will be a partner on trying to get the appropriate treatment and consequence for the people in our community. So that's one thing that I wanted to make sure that you know that I've appreciated is your support for the Housing First model and the services that we can provide to try to keep people out of the criminal justice system. Secondly, I heard Jack say if this isn't the proposal we like, that he would like to have some very clear specifics about what he would like. We would like, and I think that that's very fair, and I think that once you get information from staff that we certainly will be able to do that for the county.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you much.
Now we will hear from our finance director on a cut-in-half financial first quarter report. He's always brief. He's quick. No, that's all right. It's okay.
Good afternoon, Brian Henshaw, Finance Department. I'm going to try something new and sit over here today. Today's presentation is on the first quarter, so January through March of 2015. The complete financial report and the presentation is online if anyone would like to do it. Please feel free to interrupt and ask questions. I will go fast and brief, but if you have anything you want to bring up, please do it while I'm going. I will just caution you, I have been working on this since I sent it to you last weekend, so the presentation, the slides might be in a slightly very different order, but not too much. The very first one that we monitor as a dashboard item is non-farm jobs in Whatcom County. We're averaging about 4,000 more than last year each month for the first 3 months, 89.3 thousand jobs. This is a good indicator of the economy overall. It's kind of the reciprocal of the unemployment number, which you also hear in the news all the time, but it's more important to have jobs and the jobs creation than just how many people are participating in the job search. But the unemployment rate is about 5.9%, the same as the state. And it's only slightly higher than the national trend of 5.4%. The next thing I'd like to show is the building activity for the first quarter. This is the value of the permits that have come into the permit center, $32.7 million for the first 3 months, which is a good, healthy amount. You can see that we're about here in the last 2 years, slightly below, about $10 million less than last year, which was a big year, year over year. But we also have a good diversification here, single family, mixed use, a little bit of commercial, and then some alterations.
Is this apples to apples, same time in the year?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah. An important distinction, though, is that on the revenue side, so this is the value of the permits. On the revenue side, we're actually higher than last year. So some of last year's permits, it all depends on the timing of the project, and when you pay the last one when you come in to pick up your permit. So a lot of this work is done. The permits could sit there for a period of time until the construction season happens or everything else works out. So year over year, the revenue is up 29% over last year, as well as our expenses. They're up about 17%. But we have two big projects going on right now in the permit center. One you heard about earlier today, the rental registration program, and two is the permitting software. So we do plan and anticipated and budgeted additional expenditures for this year. Citywide revenues, $50.5 million for the first quarter. This is up 6% over last year. We're about $47.5 million last year. The largest increase is on utility charges for services, this year-over-year comparison here. It's up about $1.6 million. This is primarily water, sewer, and stormwater charges. So at the beginning of the year, January 1st, there was a rate increase in all three of those. In addition to that, with the water meter conversion program, we have switched, so the timing is a little bit different from last year to this year as we converted people on January 1st to being metered. So all of those are part of the reasons that this year is higher than last year. Sales and service and rentals income, the next line here, it's up about 4%. And then I have sales tax. Year over year on sales tax, we're up about 3.5%. Utility taxes is flat. And business taxes were up about 3% year over year also. So start of the year is fairly good. Citywide expenditures, $48.4 million. This is up 2.4% over last year. Just about across the board, operations are up about 1%, and I will point out several times today that this is understated due to all the contracts that are unsigned. So we have some contracts that go back to 2013, some contracts in 2014. There's going to be a large amount of retro pay at some point in the future when those are settled. So right now the operational expenses are on budget, but they're understated. The next thing I'll talk about is just briefly is the four main enterprise funds. The first one is street fund. The first thing I'll point out is that we did make a change this year. So 2015 is the first year that we split the street fund into two. This represents only the street direct activities, taking care and maintaining the streets and planning for the streets. Last year and prior to this, we also included the administrations for public works and the engineering department, and then billed through interfunds to all of the other departments that utilize those services. So this will be a first year. Some of the numbers are going to be skewed because of that, like this one here, where you have a large decrease from last year to this year because of that change in the accounting. But year over year, street revenues, if you take out the things that are not being accounted for in there any longer, we're about flat for the year. Sales tax is just slightly below, and that's due to a smaller allocation this year in the budget to the street funds. Grants, we've done very well on grants. There's a large backlog in the streets. We billed. This just means that we did some work and we're billing in the first quarter for that activity.
Brian?
Yes.
TBD is not included in these two charts,
No, the TBD is totally separate as its own individual fund.
even though they contribute into street.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Street expenses have been $3 million for the first quarter. Again, because of the accounting changes, the services, repairs, and interfund is slightly less than last year, and then salaries and benefits. This mainly, we've split, all of the engineers are now out of the street fund and in their own internal service fund, along with the admin. So you don't see a large amount of salaries and benefits that then is billed to all the other funds. So it's strictly an accounting change. Capital projects are up about $300,000 or 31% for the first quarter of this year versus the first quarter of last year. The next fund is the water fund. Water revenues are $6.1 million. You can see the large conversion here from unmetered to metered and all the activity. We also had the rate increase that took place at the beginning of the year. And then in the watershed fee, this also went up by the Consumer Price Index on January 1st, so revenues are trending higher than last year. Again, some of this is going to be on a timing. Now that more and more of the city's housing is on meters, we're going to have variations in use. We've had a very mild first 5 months of the year, so water activity this year, unfortunately, because of the rain and the drought conditions, people are watering earlier. So all of that is going to be a factor on the water revenues as we go forward. This is up about $700,000 over last year, or 13%. Water expenses of trending $4 million for the first quarter. Again, you see a little bit of changes here for the accounting change on the services here and also in salaries and benefits. The water fund and the sewer fund have set employees that work in both those funds, and then we bill for wherever the work is done. Oftentimes, if there's a water leak, that means that all of the people are going to be going to fix that water leak, or a sewer, vice versa. So we're making some accounting changes this year. Overall, it's going to reduce the impact of that interfunding and just show the actual costs in each of their respective funds. So it'll be a change in both these funds as we go forward. Water fund expenses are about $150,000 less than last year. It's down 4%. The one section that is up is this one right here, and this is for supplies and also the meters and also the work that's happening for the conversions. So that continues to be a big project for the water fund to convert all of the remaining people to meters, and that has to be done in the next year and a half by 2017, January 1st. The next fund is sewer. Sewer revenues were $5.3 million. This is about $700,000 higher than last year, or a 15% increase. Most of that has to do with the rate change again. You'll see here where this is the accounting change that I've been speaking about, system demand and other revenues. This would be interfund revenues to the other departments or funds. So that's on about budget.
Brian?
Yep.
Why is the unmetered up compared to the metered versus the water, where it's just the opposite?
So on the meter side, most of that is still unmetered. Houses aren't unmetered. It's you're billed on the amount of water. So the metered sewer revenue really is for the industrial users. So you're not seeing the change that you did on the water meters from one to the other.
Okay.
And both rates increased. So you see both of them are going up by the amount of the increase.
Got it. Thank you.
Sewer expenses, $3.8 million. The main change here is for the capital side, obviously. The wastewater treatment plant expansion finished up at the end of last year, so we're about $3 million less in expenditures than last year, and almost all of that was on the capital side. I will say that operation expenses are up about 3% year to date, and that's $100,000. All right, now I'll go on to the general fund. This was a dashboard that I used to just monitor the general fund revenues. I'll go through it on the top, but basically on each line here you'll see sales tax. This is the budgeted amount in the general fund only of $12 million. And then the 2015 trend is based on the first 3 months in this case of what we've received, and then I take the historical rate that we collect that, so it builds in seasonality into the equation. And then it's forecasting out if everything matches up on the way we normally receive sales tax. At the end of the year, we would be over the budget. The trend is running at $12.566 million. And then this number here is the amount that we would end the year above budget. So again, it's a seasonal forecast using just the first 3 months. It's not how we are comparing on a trend basis. So right now, if you forecast that out, we're doing well at 4.5%. That assumes that we continue for the next 9 months, obviously. On B&O tax here, this one is showing a negative trend right now of $265,000 or negative 2%. The reason for this, though, is because of the medical health exemption that we removed at the beginning of the year. So what you're seeing is that the historical collection rates don't accurately reflect the new budgeted amount. So I'm going to adjust this trend. Right now, B&O tax is trending about 3% if you remove the impacts to the hospital out for the year over what we had last year without any other changes. So that's an important differential here. And then the next section here is all the utility taxes that we collect. The first three are water, sewer, and storm. I've been saying that we did have rate increases on January 1st. You'll see that we are trending much higher than we did last year because of the rate increase and then also the changes in the routes. So when we did the conversions, the changes in the routes are changing some of the timing. But you also see the impacts of a very mild winter on electricity and gas. Obviously, winter utility rates were less than because of the mild weather, and so you'll see that we're trending much below. This is the second year in a row for a mild winter and utility taxes being below budget on those utilities. The other ones are franchise fees, which is right on budget. Total general fund, we're really just right above it with all the changes. The other significant positive trend is on the real estate. The first 3 months of the year, there's been a lot of real estate transactions, so the real estate excise tax is trending about $800,000 more than budget if it completes the year. This is tracked in its own fund, but we can use those for a lot of different purposes, so I put it on here. So overall, positive trends on the general fund revenue sources for the first 3 months. A little more detail on sales tax, just to give you where there's been good growth. You'll see food and eating and drinking establishments. It sounds like what I said last quarter too, also in construction and building material. However, where I am concerned is on general merchandise, just because this is the largest retail section of all of our revenue. This accounts for about 25% of all the sales tax generated in the city, and this is the second year in a row that it is a negative trend. It is down, let's see, 5.3% for the first 3 months over last year. So a lot of this has to do with Canadian shoppers. People are not spending that fuel savings that they achieved in the gas, lower gas prices, at least not on the general merchandise, and so the other ones are a little bit more variable. Dan, do you have a question?
What accounts for the increase in construction?
Well, there's been a number of construction projects that are going on, and then it also relates to the permit activity. Not one big thing, but we did have a number of hotels that just opened up. There's mixed-use development going on, and I was happy to hear earlier today about that housing program on the used car lot, and I don't think that's been in permits yet, so that was good news. So a lot of just smaller projects. Last year we had the wastewater treatment plant in there, which was on the permit, but not necessarily generating as much sales tax. So how does that all go together? This is a seasonally adjusted revenue forecast for the general fund. You'll see here the two big spikes are for property taxes that come in the end of April, beginning of May, and then October, November. But we started the year just right about on. We're slightly below in February, and we're slightly above for March. So again, indications are a start to a good year. I think there's a lot of mixed reports in the national economy, but also locally here. The jobs numbers are very good, but there's a lot of concern on what's happened to retail. Even April and May national retail announcements today were at or below expectations. So a lot of people are maybe paying down debt, which would be a good thing for the long term, but we're not seeing necessarily the sales tax generated. Really quickly, general fund expenditures, $16.8 million. This is up about $300,000 over last year, or 2%. All departments are at or below their budgets, but again, I'll just point out that that's trending a little bit higher because of the contract situation, so we'll need to continue to monitor that through the end of the year. The only real large decrease here is on non-departmental, and that has to do with interfund transfers from the general fund to pay for the federal building. So that project is now well on its way, but we transferred money last year to pay for it, and we're transferring some more money and paying for that out of REIT this year. So that's why you see a decrease on that one, but everything else is trending just slightly up over year. The last thing I need to talk about is investments. We have $156.9 million invested currently. On the left here, this chart just shows you where our investment is. We have municipal bonds, federal agencies, federal callables. The state pool is basically a money market account. I have 16% of our investment portfolio in that. This is just about the same amount we had a year ago, and even 3 months ago. It's only varied about $3 million. We have some large acquisitions that you'll be talking about next, and then over here, this is our portfolio return. It's at 0.88%, so less than 1%, but we are trending higher than both the state pool and the benchmark, which is basically the Merrill Lynch municipal bond portfolio that we compare ourselves to as we go forward. And then last, I did add one more slide. I want to leave you with this. Since 2010, basically what this is showing over here is the amount of debt that the city has, and then on this axis over here is the per capita, which is on this line here. So really what the trend is from 2010 we had $49.3 million of debt, $610 per capita, and over the last 4 years we've increased that to about $100 million of debt, which is $1,200 per capita. Now, a lot of this is related to the wastewater treatment plant, so that was about a $50 million project, 30-year bond. So that's the largest contributor to this. In addition, the state continues to reduce funding in the grant arena, so we have taken advantage of several grant/loans that we have used to build projects. And then I've also brought to you several loan opportunities, one for the 6 ambulances, and then the next one that we're talking about now is the LED lights. But we put this together for the CAFR, which is the comprehensive annual financial report that we do for the auditors every year, where the auditors are here right now. We get them for 3 months each year to come in and look at what we're doing. And so this chart is one that's in the back of that. And as I was going through it, I thought we should discuss it, show it to you. It is manageable, but it is important to know that we are continuing to add debt where it's responsible and used to pay for it. Those loan/grant projects that we're using for Squalicum Creek reroute and also for the, the creek in the south side work that's being done. Patton Creek daylighting, thank you. They're at very favorable rates, usually below 2%, so some of them are at 1 and 1.5 or 2%. So it is a good way to fund these projects, but it does limit some of the opportunities that we'll have in the future because it does take debt service. So some of those are 10-year loans, some of them are 20-year loans, and then we have 30-year bonds out there. So any questions on anything that I presented today?
Any questions for Brian? Okay, thank you very much, Brian.
All right.
That was good. Okay, we will now go to approval of minutes for the afternoon session of May 4th.
Move approval.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor will say aye. 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 All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Old or new business? Oh, my goodness, there it is again. Roxanne, go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to make it brief right now and say that tonight I'm looking forward to providing a little report on everything that I learned and everything that I loved about going through fire ops training down in Richland with our firefighter department.
Ooh, that sounds interesting. Anybody else? Okay, we will now adjourn to executive session. We have 5 items. The first item is potential property acquisition for 5 minutes. Second item is property acquisition for 5 minutes. Third is potential property acquisition for 5 minutes. Then we have litigation matter for 5 minutes. Potential litigation 10 minutes. Should be back at 4:30 to adjourn.